Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the Improvisational Storytelling Podcast, where every week a few people get together, we combine our ideas, and turn them into a story that you can enjoy. I hope you enjoy this one. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. This is a continuation, final story of a 3-part series that we've been going on here. Does anyone want to do a synopsis of what's been going on? Reed?
I'm not quite up to the synopsis on this one.
Okay,
I was just trying to remember what we decide to call it. Dreams give way to darkness? That was the opening scene.
I don't remember exactly what we decided to call it, but I can find that out here in just a second. I just have to look at a past episode.
I really liked the beginning scene. That was Seth.
Yeah, Seth, start the synopsis, and I'll come in.
Okay, yeah, I did the synopsis last time, so hopefully most of it should be fairly congruent, and just correct me if I'm missing something or forgot something.
Mission to the Deep Dark.
Okay, so
Mission to the Deep Dark. Okay.
Yep, that's what it's called.
So with the opening scene, basically we have a world that is kind of a couple hundred years or so after a post-apocalyptic event.
Yep.
You have kind of two societies that have grown up, not the mole people, but like people that live underground, and they have like a hive society. And kind of like in Time Machine, where you had like the up top, you had the Eloi, and below you had, Reed had it right off the top of his head last week.
What's the underground people in the
Morlocks?
The Morlocks. I knew it started with an M. Okay, so the Morlocks. So the Morlocks have kind of, because it's a post-apocalyptic thing, they had kind of, where they started out would have been like the bunkers and kind of the refuge areas of the world. So they kind of keep in a semblance of some types of technology, but of course it's post-apocalyptic, so it's just kind of put back together or repurpose things that might have had a different purpose, but they're kind of being used otherwise. So what they have is a particular kind of nanotechnology thing that's put into the food and water supply that basically keeps most of the people linked in a kind of like a hive mind, where they're not completely, what do they call it? Everyone's still
mind controlled.
Yeah, they're not completely mind controlled, but they're just kind of guided by kind of their superiors in a way where, you know, they'll be like the queen or the king bee or ant, basically, and they can kind of give direction to like their underlings who give direction to their underlings, but it all kind of funnels back to kind of here. And it's like, not that the people underneath of this are like completely unindependent, but they just, like, if they're given an order or directive, they just kind of go about doing it because it's like they're compelled to do it.
Yeah, basically the nanites were a thing given to miners, like people who would dig underground, as a way to sort of form them into a more perfect team, you know, so that they could be kind of like do really dangerous work and kind of know where each other are. And the director could kind of lay out how he wanted the work done. You know, it just made dangerous work more efficient. It's now being used on a much more suggestive civilization scale, which is not in any way what it was meant for. So it doesn't rob them of their agency completely, but it does sort of make it just the easiest to do is to follow orders.
Right. So it just kind of helps give like an instant line of communication, but also a grander line of suggested, like compelled direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it keeps different societies that are underground in kind of a hive mind mentality. Above ground, you have kind of either people that have escaped, and I say escaped or left these things or have survived whatever kind of apocalyptic thing happening above. They're the uplanders and the subterraneans.
I think that's what we were calling them.
Before all this happened, we have the society before. They kind of solved everything in kind of like an Olympic games fashion. where if two nations were going to go to war, they kind of settled their differences with, whose athlete could throw a discus the farthest, or whose athlete won the most gold medals in one of the games or sets of games. And so war itself was kind of unheard of for a long time. And so you had a post-scarcity society that, for the most part, knew nothing but peace. But somewhere, of course, it's always happening. Someone pushed a trigger that made someone initiate something, and now we're in this post-apocalyptic world. But before that, kind of like how, we would look at, because a lot of this, I think what we had kind of played itself off of that. You have some of these different warriors that these different countries built up mirrored what we would see as maybe Poseidon, one of these athletes. They had what they were also trained as these high class warriors, so that they could compete athletically and just be the top of their game.
Once the war did start, they went from being just athletes to being
practically demigods because of their high-tech armor and weapons that would have mirrored, you had the one guy with a suit that would allow him to traverse underwater, and he had the trident, and it would kind of, if you want to say, become what we would call Poseidon. Or a bow that would, had a heat-seeking, directive on it or something. And all these suits that then basically gave them extra strength or extra speed and extra abilities to help kind of hone and tone, these warriors' natural abilities. And so you have all these, their top athletes or the, top warriors of the world had these things. And that'll come in later. The other thing we've got going on is one of the things that built the tunnels that these people live in, these hives, would have been the subterranes. It's like a drill, but it's not just like a drill like we would think today. It actually would drill out, melt down, and create a 9x9. And I'm pretty sure there's probably ones that would make bigger or smaller depending on what they needed to make these tunnels, these underground tunnels. But then it would coat that tunnel with the almost crystallized rock, sand, gravel, whatever it was that it dug out. It would pack in and make a almost impenetrable kind of cocooned barrier, which then made a perfect kind of getaway for when all this went down. And so that is kind of an old relic of the past. One of the things that is utilized by the subterranean people, where they will, they'll use those and they can kind of pop up, through different areas and then hop back in and then jump back into the earth, and then the uplanders can't follow because it'll kind of seal it back off. And our opening scene kind of opened to where what we've decided is our kind of group, which becomes kind of our hero group, or a group that is around the hero eventually. Kind of following after. It's like these rangers. It's what the uplanders have done is they're kind of like loose confederates of clans and people groups. And what they've done is they've brought up these rangers that kind of keep the law and peace, and they kind of roam around. And a lot of the rangers are very attuned, highly trained people. They don't have all the high tech stuff that the subterranean people do, where the subterranean people have kept a lot of different armor, night vision. And so they're high tech and very capable, but without it, they're kind of uncapable because they're so dependent on their technology. And what they've done is they stopped this one group of subterraneans from coming up and having taken something, and they're chasing them down. The subterraneans, they've lost their subterrane to get back, and so they have to go to where one of the gates are, one of the official gates, to get to one of their hives. So they have to travel back, and so they're chasing them. That's kind of how it all started out. The other thing is you have our hero, or do one of you guys have hero this week?
Well, Levi started introducing the hero through the unique pet in the first one. Yeah. So our hero is bonded with Fido.
All right, and Fido is something from the old world. It was a kind of a drone, a high-tech kind of protective drone. It kind of looks like a German Shepherd, but it's like 15 feet tall, and it is. It was originally designed to kind of protect a high-tech military facility.
Like roam and protect like a missile silo sites, that was like up in the mountains. And so they just like genetically engineered / created a cyborg. And they used like a lot of the neural nets and a lot of the brain patterns of a dog, because a dog's like sort of natural affinity for territory, trainability, and all these different things. But Fido did that for hundreds of years and has just completed his first system reset in order to like clear up errors in memory and stuff. But has basically reset himself to like the cognition level of a puppy, and therefore he is really powerful, but doesn't really know what, he's not like in control of himself. It's just like a giant puppy the size of a freight train.
And he ends up kind of bonding himself to our hero at some point.
I think before we start into the story, we have to bring up the unique artifact from last time. It was one of these champions, a warrior woman, had this weapon.
Do you remember?
It was like
Do you remember her name?
It was like Athena or something.
I just called her warrior woman, and she had a rich scientist father that crafted one of these super suits, and she had this pitch black javelin, like you would have in Olympic Games throwing a javelin, but it was made of this material that would like suck light and was practically virtually invisible and indetectable from any radar or any scanner, and it could increase or decrease its own mass, so you could hurl it like a really long way, and then it would, before impact, it would like maximize its mass for maximum damage. And anyway, I thought it was interesting to me. Anyway, I thought that was kind of important.
Yeah, it's currently sitting just in a locker in one of the subterranean bunkers, because whoever has those nanites, it hides itself from detection, and so it's just been sitting in a locker for like 100 years. Cool. Waiting for someone who isn't connected to the nanite network in order to pick it up and see if they can use it. All right. So what did you guys have? That was a great synopsis.
Yeah, I had Villian.
I have hero's sidekick.
I have wise old woman. So should we go with villain first?
Sure.
Sounds good.
Okay, so because we don't really have a clear villain.
Yeah, okay, so the last bit with the artifact plays in good because it has to do with the villain. So the villain, I think, what was the name I picked out? Goodness sakes. I had it just like 10 minutes before we started this. And Tori Horndall.
Jesse. Oh, Tori Torndall?
Tori Horndall, like horned all, like a all that has horns on it. Anyways.
Okay.
Tori Horndall. He is someone that had at one point escaped the hive, one of the hives. Because that's one of the other things, is most of these hives are pretty hostile towards the Uplanders.
Yeah.
2 or 3 of the hives aren't quote unquote allied or directly friendly. But what they do is they hold like carnivals where they'll come out to where they've like got their big gate that's kind of impenetrable or whatever. And they'll open it up like 4 times a year to the Uplanders to do trade. Now, of course, they're not going to trade. They're not just going to give, subnuclear
valuable
weapons
technology, right,
to the Uplanders. But it's like, they've got, some ammo, because there's like stuff up in the uplands that they can grow or accumulate or get, like hides, because they can't really get animals underground, even with all their technology.
Right.
animal life. Like you can do plants with like UV lighting, but like animals just don't thrive underground like that. And so they have to get leather materials, meats of some sorts. And so they trade off some different resources. And so kind of like when, we had the Western expansion and, we'd trade different, guns to the Indians. And so it was like the Indians couldn't, produce any of that themselves. So some of them might have some guns, but it was kind of a limited supply. And they'd have to do some pretty good horse trading to get any more ammo for anything that they would have had.
Right.
And that's kind of what it is. So they'll give them like some ammo, not enough to like do any damage to any of their excursions, but just enough to kind of keep them happy and get them what they want and find and look and trade for different things. Because a lot of times, a lot of these artifacts or high-tech artifacts that the subterranean people look for are still kind of scattered about the uplands.
Right.
And so they make different trades to see if they can find any of these things and bring them in. And sometimes they bring stuff in, but they kind of have a hint to some of these old things. And much like some of those weapons or armor that might go undetected, they know that they're specific, but they can't do anything with them because they can tell that's why like that spear and some of that stuff is in that locker, is because like they can tell there's something and someone 150 years ago traded it because it was, tech, but they couldn't really see it or figure it out. So it's just been sitting in a locker.
Right.
Tori Horndal had at one point, maybe from an expedition, had been separated from ingesting all these nanobite stuff. And so he became maybe the lone survivor of an expedition to the uplands and came across like a library, and he was reading, and he like basically got a higher education above what, the people that are underground would have known about other stuff. And so for a long time, I don't know if there's like dispersion in age, but anyways, one way or another, he's been at this a while, but he lives back in the hives, but he has like a very particular diet. He doesn't eat the hive food. He doesn't drink the hive water. That's one of the things that he trades the uplanders for, is for food and things that are not tainted by the nanobites. But where his position is he's actually like a top advisor, not in any like command, but just an advisor to one of like the queen bees or the queen ants of one of these colonies that do trade with the uplanders. And what he's doing is, after he kind of read about all these, some of these tech things like the weapons and stuff like that, he has in mind to gather these things together basically under the nose of these hive people, because most of them won't see them as important. They've redeveloped all their kind of high-tech stuff based on some of this stuff, but in a way that then they can use. So all this other even superior high-tech stuff is kind of like that spear. They see it, but they just don't notice it. It just kind of goes under the radar for them. But he is trying to gather them together and put together the most powerful one for himself, and find 2 or 3 or however, basically make his own pantheon of basically super soldiers that with these equipment will basically be undefeatable and emerge with an army from the underground and lead the subtrains up to basically conquer the world and place themselves up as basically gods using these old world high-tech trinkets.
I love it. One part military organizer, one part crazed religious zealot. Perfect.
Yeah.
I have a feel. Okay.
Yeah. No, that was my idea. I didn't even have to think about it this week. I had that idea at the very end of last week. It just like fit so well. And so that's why
great.
I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll have to go. And then I'm like, I got to have villains. So, yeah, that's kind of what it is. He's kind of the top advisor, but he keeps himself so he can have secrets, because he's not connected to their hive mind. He's just because of his education, he's kind of weaseled his way into not having to submit, to the, brain search of being connected to the nanobites.
Right.
But that holds heavy sway as an advisor to, one of these hives that do in fact trade often enough with the Uplanders.
Cool. Reed, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think so. There's my hero sidekick. Actually, is one of the guys. He has control of one of the remaining subterranes, and his name, they call him Mole. Which, yeah. So here's the story. Mole has a knack. He has an almost magical situational awareness. When he is driving the subterrane, he just seems to know his bearing and depth. I mean, and he has really quick lightning reflexes and follows the old. He's been able to keep all the sensors and everything's working, but he found a device that had, a lot of this technology was there, but fell into disuse because nobody understood how to use it. And there's a mechanism that he has rediscovered, and it's a specific mechanism for dissolving the tunnel behind his rig. So in other words, instead of creating a tunnel, he can just traverse whatever, rock or gravel or earth, and it can go faster because he doesn't. There's no energy consumed in like fortifying it's just enough to get the vehicle through the earth, and then it just collapses behind. So he can this vehicle can be used for raids, and they can't be followed. That's the problem with the subterranes, is that they just leave a perfect trail. So, raiding isn't like you can take the ship in and shoot up the harbor.
A pre-existing path or leave a trail.
Right. So, well, anyway, I don't think we have the hero has a name yet, but he was in a position to give the hero a ride. There was a hero had something he wanted to accomplish, and he was able to contract with Mole to get him where he needed to go. And he also had to bring Fido along, which was something of a project. And Mole rigged up a series of blocks to kind of help Fido from being jostled and stuff. Because, it's a rough ride sometimes. If you hit different densities, you're traveling through loose gravel, for example, and then you hit solid rock, and it's just, there's all kinds of things involved in subterranean travel. And Fido he just appreciates, like, yeah, this guy, anyway, he just really appreciated that he went to the trouble to make it less annoying for Fido, and so he kind of earned the brute's approval. And kind of from that point on, the Mole was the hero sidekick, because he just kind of connected himself, and it just sort of worked out that they're a team.
That's great. Excuse me. So, as we sit right now, what was the villain's name again, Seth?
Tori Horndal.
Tori Horndal is amassing these items. We don't know how many he has. He might have a lot. He might have a few. And he's currently trying to sort of stir up the beginnings of religious fervor in these hives in order to sort of create a kind of like a holy war. I have the imagining that he's maybe trying to do like a classist thing. Like, they've been up there. We're the real preserved human beings. They're changed because of the wars. They're no longer human beings. Whatever it is he's trying to do, he's trying to basically create division in order to create soldiers. And then we have the hero, who originally was from a hive and then has rejected and left, and now travels with the Rangers, hunting down hive people who try to steal things from the above ground, hunting down criminals. Sort of the bulk of the story is him kind of traveling around with them, learning how to, not rely on automatic sighted weapons and stuff like that, and how to trust himself, and meets Fido along the way, and that's like kind of like a crazy thing, and then meets Mole. As my idea is this is what I'm picturing, is that the bunker where Horndal is around the Grand Canyon area. In his travels, the hero and Fido and Mole have made it up to like northern Colorado, right? And then they hear the words that something is happening, and so then they come back to basically, maybe the hero was a student of Horndal's, and so he knows the danger that Horndal presents. Maybe they've heard the rumors. I don't know.
And maybe that's what it was. Maybe his group originally came out on directive of something Horndal wanted them to find or get. And maybe our hero kind of had risen into the upper echelons of Horndal's inner circle, and was able to kind of come across some of his other books, and he kind of reads through some of his stuff, see some of his plans, and he kind of maybe started becoming aware of what he was up to, but maybe didn't quite have the full information of understanding why that would be wrong or right, but something in the back of his head kept telling him that something wasn't right with this. And so he's like off with the group because they had to go out and, let's say, snag something that maybe this town had, and it was like one of the suits, or it was like the bow or something, and for one of the the old power weapons. And so he was with that group, but then in seeing the upland, and then kind of realizing that knowing that Horndal was making stuff up and had plans to make religious fervor to, let's say, cause division and create a holy war eventually. He was kind of aware that, in the back of his head, he's like, oh, this will be good for our hive. We'll be able to expand. We'll be able to reach to our former glory. But then something wasn't quite right. I mean, it seemed all fine, but then once he got kind of out, he started putting pieces together that, this was just a different group of people that, through their kind of wit and skill, survived upland instead of in the bunkers, and then kind of put some of the history that he would have read through the stuff he got from Horndal, and ends up maybe taking the bow and leaving, or tries to.
I was thinking is that for one, it'd be really cool, excuse me, for merchandising purposes, like when we eventually sell this as a movie, that each of the Rangers get a really powerful piece of kit, right?
Yeah.
Right? For merchandising purposes only, each of the Rangers get a really powerful piece of kit. And what I think how this story goes is that he spends a bunch of time, so he leaves, spends a bunch of time, and then there's like a run-in where they meet more of the hive people, and they kill them, and in killing them, they sort of sneak in, and you're like, oh wow, I'm only a quarter of the way through the book. How is this the end already? And they sneak in, and they steal some things, but what they also steal is Horndal's sort of journal of all the places he's visited, right? And he doesn't give a list about what he took or what he was able to accomplish, but there's like all these places heading north. And so what they do is they basically start heading north to each of these settlements and cities, and they go to a city, and the city's like overrun with these zombies, right? and they fight them off, and they go, this didn't used to be this way, but 5 years ago, a guy came in and took the sacred cowl. And they're like, what? And what it is it's a cowl that you put on, and it allows you to emit a emotion to people, and it makes them feel it. And it was set to fear to their enemies, because the athlete who died saving this city hundreds of years ago basically hard-coded that any enemy of the town would be afraid to enter. And Horndal came into that being able to defeat it and took it. And then they keep going to all these different places, and they kind of get a picture of everything that he has and has now accomplished. And that's where they meet the wise old woman, which is the daughter of the, I don't remember her name. She's my character, and I don't remember her name, and I feel terrible.
I didn't write it down either.
Yeah, you typically do. So I was really hoping, but that's fine. It's her daughter, right? Which is weird because it's been hundreds of years, but her daughter basically looks like a young woman, but she is like 200 years old. And she is like the last thing that he couldn't get, that he was trying to get. Because if he could get her, then he could, use her blood to manufacture basically pass-throughs to use all the machines, just like do a bunch of stuff. And she talks to them a little bit and fills in a lot of the history that we didn't know, that we've talked about here, but that we didn't know about. Like, these people weren't gods. These people were athletes. It was like selfishness that caused the end of the world. It wasn't greed. It was terror. It was that no one trusted each other. However, she basically informs them about what it is and what's going on. And, Horndal, I keep saying Heimdall. Horndal shows up right at some minute, and there's a fight, and then she is taken or killed, and then they have to basically come down. And as they come down, they're like, this is a death sentence where, Mole is burning the miner at full power. We're going to die any minute, But they go to each town, and in each town, they sort of gather more people until they are able to meet this great conflagration. They're sort of able to meet the threat with more numbers, with more willing participants. Just because a guy can jump 50 feet into the air and can punch really hard, and is a warrior, if he isn't there willingly, there is a level of performance. A person who fights willingly is a person who fights harder, even if the other person is technically more powerful. Now, a higher skilled person will typically always win, but there is a lot to say for defending your homeland and having heart.
Amen.
So that is kind of how I see the whole thing coming together. He takes this journey to try and find out what it is Horndal is planning, sees these different cities and towns and villages, realizes that this entire area was the last stand, was where the last battle was, because these quote unquote gods could traverse hundreds of miles in a couple of minutes. So they fought in this huge area in these mountains and stuff. They fought there, and they died in different places, and so they find some artifacts. They find artifacts that have been looted, what do you guys think about that?
This is a really cool story.
Yeah.
And it's all based on whatever, that geography is what I was kind of thinking of. Cause I went to the Grand Canyon a couple of years ago, and then traveled up through Colorado, and it's just like, it's beautiful and awesome, and it just makes me think of wastelands, post-apocalyptic, broken areas, but huge, wide expanses where you can see really far, you know. Anyways, that's kind of what I was thinking. Should I call that canon and draw us here in this episode to a close? Unless Seth has any other interesting ideas. I feel like at some time Fido will probably sacrifice himself.
Of course he will.
Yeah, like he'll run a bomb into the into like the main vault or something. You know, he will have grown up enough so that he's a responsible young adult or adult dog. He's no longer a puppy. I'm not sending a puppy to kill itself, but you know what I mean?
Something towards the end and like the last frenzied battle of, you know, Horndal and his kind of cronies coming up, and they've got several bits of the suits of power and the Rangers and their group, and it's just kind of almost like whatever the last battle would have been the couple hundred years ago, almost like coming to head again with, you know, new faces.
Yeah. And I see the warrior woman, the daughter, the wise old woman.
Yeah.
Does she come up with the magic javelin?
If we want to, that's fine. I don't want to leave a god left over though, because she would basically, that's kind of what she would basically be, because she's like a relic from the older age.
Yeah.
But that would be okay. Maybe she does that, and then she sort of dons all of the little pieces of the armor from everywhere else, you know, puts on the cap, puts on this thing, and then just kind of says like, you know, they kind of ask her, so are you going to keep all those? Because they now have friends from every city and town where those things were providing key functions to keeping their civilizations running. And she just kind of says, you know, I'll drop them off as I go or something, you know, and then just kind of jumps off into the distance.
Yeah. Of course, then we had the happy ending where, you know, the Rangers, Cedric and Reagan, they were hanging out at the campsite, and then the spacecraft landed.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
And yeah, because they had gotten, you know, like several hundred years ago, they'd sent by subspace relay, yeah, things are coming apart here. You guys are on your own. And they've been out there in the stars, you know, seeding humankind throughout the galaxy. And they decided to send a mission back. And, you know, it's taken them hundreds of years. So they were in cryosleep, and they were, you know, in orbit for a while trying to see what was going on. They saw the ruins and you know, the destroyed civilization. And they land, and the ramp comes down, and they say, how you guys doing? And we heard the bad news. We're from Deep Space Colony. And right then, Mole comes up out of the ground, and Fido has to check him out. You know, Fido's already, he's toast by this time.
Oh no.
So it wasn't quite a happy ending, but anyway.
Well, just because one of your friends died doesn't make it not a happy ending.
Just because everything turned to crap here for a while, you know, they seem to be getting it back together just in time to reconnect with the Brotherhood.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. I don't know if you guys know, but we have written so many. This story here tracks so much with the Fallout universe, the Fallout video game universe. And I know that neither Seth or Reed have played it. And it's just really freaky to me how just absolutely spot on a lot of what you guys are saying is.
Well, okay, I admit, I have proper attribution. Originally, the unique vehicle in the first episode was this tunnel, this subterrane that made these tunnels. And you said it would have been really cool if it could just do that, but not leave the tunnels, you know? And I thought that was always a weak point of the unique vehicle. So I just kind of added that in, that Mole figured out how to do that. So you had this like stealth tunnel.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you liked this episode and this whole series of episodes, I would say, you know, excuse me, I would say send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Drop us an IM. Send us an instant message. drop by our MySpace page. Find us on Twitter at at Gets Better Cast. If you didn't like this episode, if you thought we should have just went full Fallout and made ghouls and super mutants and everything could have been a nice shade of green, I would say just wait. It gets better.